Hi. Today I thought I would talk about why I chose to give birth with a midwife instead of a regular doctor at a hospital. And before I get into that, I just want to say I feel like how you give birth and how that all works. It's really a personal choice for a mom and her partner. And so I don't mean to be judgmental. Some people love going to the doctor and that's their favorite thing and they can't imagine a birth without that. And that's really how I felt when I had Daphne. And then some stuff that happened sort of changed my mind. And so that's what I'm going to tell you about. But not because I want to be judgmental or tell you I think I know the best way. I just think that I know the best way for me, and I'm going to explain how that happened. Whenever I was pregnant with Daphne in 2001, I went to a doctor, a female doctor, and I don't have any sexist preference, but I feel naturally comfortable with women. So I went in to see a female doctor, and after I visited her 2 or 3 times, I got a letter from my insurance saying that I was working off of an old printout and that doctor wasn't in my plan anymore. So I had to switch to a different doctor, and I just picked one that was kind of close by. I didn't really know much about him, and he was fine. He was nice, but it was one of those things where I would have an appointment at 11. I would get there at 10:45. I would finally get called back at 11:45, wait in the room until about noon. I'd finally see him, around 12:15. I'd see him for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then that was it. And so I'd been there over an hour and a half, including over an hour past my wait time, and so I'm about 3 minutes, and that was it. During that time, also, I started sort of researching the actual having birth process, and I think it's interesting, especially as a first-time mom, that you get really wrapped up in that. It seems like a huge deal, and it is a huge deal, but it's also a couple of days out of your life, and I feel like I probably obsessed over it a little too much. But I came to my doctor with a birth plan, which he read. I respected that. He really read through it, but everything that I said, he sort of fought back against. When I said I did not want an episiotomy, he asked if it was my first child and said, see, if it's your first child, that's pretty much going to be a given. I said, well, I would really rather just try to let it go naturally and see what happens. I said I didn't want any Pitocin. I didn't want anything to speed anything up or slow anything down. He didn't really speak a lot to that, but I did say if I needed pain relievers, I would prefer things that were herbal, and he thought that was silly. He said, why not just take something that's specifically designed to give you relief in the one area that you need. So he did read through the whole thing, but he pushed back on a lot of it, and still was respectful, which I appreciated. So I went through the whole pregnancy, and the day I went into labor, actually my sister and I were looking at model homes in Las Vegas, trying to get our parents to move to our side of town, and I think my cat is beating on the window. Anyway, whenever we got into the rotunda of this one really nice house, had this big marble floor and open to the second. I mean, it was huge. And I stood there and I was like, huh. And my sister said, what? And I said, I either wet myself or my water just broke. And she says I asked her to smell it, but I don't remember that part. But I do know that we just laughed so hard, and luckily there was a functioning bathroom in that particular home, and we cleaned up as much as we could. But then my sister was 8 months pregnant at the time with Mackenzie, so we got attention all day because we were these 2 big pregnant ladies out house shopping. And I won't even tell you how we played that off sometimes. But anyway, so then as we were leaving, we were just giggling, and it was so funny, and told the lady at the front desk, oh, we're really sorry, you're just going to probably need a mop in that third house. And she said that was no problem. And so we got in the car, we went home. I wasn't in any pain. I decided I would go ahead and take a shower, and while I still could. So I took a shower, and as I started getting out, I was going to fix my hair, and then my cramping just started, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to fix my hair. That's not going to work. So I told Sarah to go ahead and call the hospital, and she did, and she said, my sister's in labor. The hospital told her, and she didn't tell me this, but the hospital said, well, we don't have a bed for her, so she really shouldn't come in yet. Just have her walk around her neighborhood until she can't walk anymore. And my sister didn't tell me the part about the no beds, but when they said walk around the neighborhood until you can't anymore, I already couldn't. There was a weight pushing down, and I was very cramped. It was bad. So we waited, I don't remember how long. I had sent for some food, and by the time I got back, I couldn't even eat. And so we went ahead and went to the hospital. I got there and I checked in, and they said, we don't have anywhere for you to go, so just go wait in the waiting room. And I was dumbfounded that I had to sit in the waiting room when I was in labor. But I did. I went into the waiting room, and I remember I was sitting there, and I was just so trying to focus on something other than the pain. But there was a TV in the waiting room, and on the TV there was the Goldfish crackers commercials. They had this really obnoxious jingle. Did you hear that? That's my cat. Yeah. Okay. I live with that. Anyway, it was this really obnoxious jingle that said, like, this is the jingle for Goldfish. Jingle for Goldfish, the tiny snack that smiles back until you bite their heads off. Something like that. And I wanted to kill somebody. And I was looking around that room going, these people are laughing. They're having a conversation. They're clearly waiting. They can wait. I can't wait. I need to be where it's quiet. This is ridiculous. So I went back to the nurse's office, and I said, listen, do I have to stay here? Can I check out and go to a different hospital? And they said, well, you don't have to stay here, but we encourage you to stay here, because what happens if you start to leave and then you go into labor in the parking lot? And I thought, oh, really? Are you not going to help me if I go into labor in the parking lot? But so anyway, I ended up being like, okay. So I turned around and I was walking back to the waiting room and had a really bad contraction, I suppose, and just squatted down on the floor to just sit there and wait for it to pass. And while I was sitting here, somebody walked by, and I didn't even see her, but she was like, are you okay? And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm in a lot of pain, and there's nowhere for me to go but the waiting room, which is noisy and obnoxious. And she's like, hold on. So I don't know who this lady was. She was a nurse, I think, but she found a bed, and I literally was put in a janitor's closet. It was big enough that they could put a bed in there, but just turn the light out and close the door so I could lay down and have it be quiet. And so I was in there, and every 30 minutes or so, a nurse would come check on me. I think everybody else that was there with me was in the waiting room waiting for me. And so I remember finally when a room opened up that I was laying down, and again, in a lot of pain, sitting there just really focusing. And one of the nurses came and was like, oh, that's good. She's taking a nap. And I was furious. I was like, how do you think I can nap when I'm in this much pain? But they got me into a room, and I wasn't dilated enough to have an epidural, which is really probably the main reason that having a hospital birth was right up there on my list, because I wanted that, and I was in a lot of pain. I've had a lot of GI problems, and I thought, well, I'm going to be tough, but it was awful. And so I got in my room. I had people there visiting me. It was all good. Finally, I was dilated enough that I was able to get an epidural. And that made it better. The only reason I knew that I was having contractions at that point is that I could see it on the monitor. The one really cool thing was that, first of all, my doctor wasn't on call. And so his partner was. And so when his partner got there, I said, oh, yeah, the doctor and I have talked it over, and here's the things we're going to do. We're not going to have me having an episiotomy. We're not going to this and that. And the doctor was like, you're not going to have an episiotomy? Is this your first? Yes. He's like, well, you may have to. And I was like, if we can just wait and see, I'd really appreciate it. So anyway, the best thing that happened during that whole time is that there was a nurse there who had heard me sort of over and over telling anyone who would listen that I really wanted to be allowed just to have the baby without a whole lot of intervention. And she came in after the doctor had come in, and she talked to me. And while she talked to me, she massaged oils. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but for 4 hours, she sat with me and made it to where I would be able to have the baby without them messing with me. And in fact, whenever it was time to push, finally, she's like, yeah, we should really call the doctor right now. She goes, but I will just wait a few minutes longer. And so she really didn't call the doctor until it was time. And I think I pushed 3 times after he came in the room, and Daphne came out. And that was all fine, and we were like, we don't want vitamin K right now, just, wipe her off and put some lotion on her, it's fine. So no injections, nothing like that. And then she was with me for a while, and this time it was about 2:30 in the morning, and so they ended up wanting to take her to the nursery, and told me to go ahead and go to the bathroom. And I don't know how long I was in the bathroom, but I did fall asleep in the bathroom, because they told me not to walk back to the bed by myself. So while I was waiting for them, it was a long time and I fell asleep. And at that point, everyone in my family had gone home because everybody had to work the next day. And so what they didn't tell me when I toured, it was Mountain View in Las Vegas, which is a nice hospital. But what they didn't tell me when I toured it was that although I had a private birthing room, the recovery room was semi-private, which means not private at all. And so they wheeled my bed into there, and there was a mom in there with a baby that cried the whole night. And so Daphne was in the nursery, and although I had really wanted to spend the night with her, I felt like, as stressful as that was with the other baby crying, that, you know, if the babies in the nursery were asleep and she could sleep, that would be great. And so the next morning, the nurse came in and she said, "Oh, we're moving that other person, so you're going to be able to have a little bit of peace and quiet." And I was glad about that. And they brought Daphne in, and a nurse, a lactation consultant or whatever was there, was trying to help me figure out how to nurse. And that was sort of slow going. I didn't know at the time that Daphne was tongue-tied and she wasn't actually latching on, so she actually wasn't eating very much at all. And so that was stressful. But they did put a person in my room that was quieter, but she also had a really big family. And at any given moment, there were between 2 and 15 people in that half of the room. A lot of them were men. And so my little sliding curtain wouldn't slide all the way. And so I'd be sitting there and I'd have Daphne and I'm trying to figure out what to do with my boobs, and some man would walk in, and the first thing he sees, because I'm right by the door. And so it was really awful. And then when I had to go to the bathroom, I had to get up and walk in there, and I'm sore, and I already know that there is just blood down the back of my hospital gown and down the back of the ugly hospital pajama pants I had or whatever. I have to walk through like Moses in the Red Sea, this whole 2 walls of people to get to the bathroom, which had no fans. So I would turn on the shower and I turn on the sink and I flush the toilet just to keep water going, so while I'm in there cleaning up and going to the bathroom, that they can't hear me. And I knew, I was like, I've got to get out of this hospital. This is ridiculous. So I went back and picked Daphne up and started walking around the nurse's station, and they were like, no, you can't carry her. You need to put her back in her bed, and you can, if you want to walk, that's fine, but you have to push her around her bed. Which I thought, I mean, I get it, it's liability, but I just thought, I can't hold my baby and carry her around, really. So I put Daphne back in there and I pushed her around, and I said, you know what, I'm really ready to go home. I feel good, so if we can go now, that'd be great. And they said, well, you're checked out. Your doctor had already come by this morning and said you're fine. They said, but Daphne's doctor has to check her out. She has to stay in the hospital until he releases her. I said, well, when's he going to come by? And they said, probably when he gets done with his office work today, so like at 6 or 6:30. And so all day trying to feed Daphne, walking through those people to go to the bathroom, it was just really awful. I was so ready to be at home by myself. And the doctor kept not coming, and finally at 7:30, I told the nurses, I'm like, I really would love to go home. What's going on? And they said, oh, he had a really busy day and he's gonna just go on home, but he'll come by tomorrow morning. And I said, I don't want to spend the night in the hospital. I want to go home. I want my baby checked out and I want to go home. So they said, well, we'll tell him to come by. And he did, and he looked at her and said she was fine, but he wanted her to, she'd already evacuated. He wanted her to urinate before she could go home. And it was approaching 9 o'clock. And she hadn't yet. So I took my personal cleansing bottle and I squeezed it in her diaper, and I called the nurse and I'm like, here, okay, see. And the nurse took it, and I don't know if she took it to weigh it, but in my adult brain I was like, oh my gosh, they're taking it to the lab and they are going to do surveys on it, and they're going to find out that I lied and they're going to arrest me or something. And so of course that didn't happen, and we got to go home. And actually, if I stayed in the hospital longer, we may have found out that she was tongue-tied and wasn't eating. It took us 2 or 3 days later before we figured all that out, and once she got in the bottle, she was fine, she thrived, it was all good. But just that experience was so exhausting that I thought I didn't want to have another kid. I had some really serious postpartum issues, but I thought if I ever did get pregnant again, I would not go back and do it in a hospital. I don't apparently like people telling me what to do when it doesn't make sense to me. So my sister had Mackenzie at home and then had TJ at home, and I thought, I want a midwife. I probably don't want to have my baby at my house, but I definitely don't want to have it at a hospital. And so that's why I chose the Midwife here. It's right up and around the corner. You've gone with me. So if my, mom and dad want to be here in town, they can hang out at my house and I can go up there and we can all be together when the baby comes, if that happens. But it's just been so nice to have an appointment at a certain time and it happens within 5 minutes of when it's supposed to, and that the midwife will sit with me for 15-20 minutes, ask me how I'm doing, ask me how Daphne is doing with finding out we're having a baby, and we talk about things that are not strictly essential for having the baby, but we build that relationship before we even start in on the HGC counts and that kind of thing. So that's been nice. Another thing that's been nice is whenever I called around and whenever I found out I was pregnant last June and I was going to be, I was 40 at the time. Several places I called, there were even birthing centers that had mostly midwives, but at least one doctor. They were like, oh, okay, because you're high risk, you have to do this test, and we have to check on this, and blah, blah, blah. And when I called this Birthwise, I said, here are my issues. Number one, at the time I had really bad sciatica from the ruptured disc. So number two, I'm really too old to have a kid. And she laughed. She's like, if you are pregnant, you're not too old. So she tells me that. She's like, your body knows what it needs. You just listen to your body. When it tells you to rest, you rest. When it tells you to eat, you eat. There are actually 3 midwives. There's Natalie, Jamie, and April. And I'll meet with all of them because one of them will be on call whenever I go into labor. So I'll be very comfortable with all of them. And so far, I'm really enjoying it. What's interesting is that even though I loved that epidural, I feel like now, having learned more about birthing, that I missed out on a bonding experience, because it seems like women who have natural labor, there's like this intense pain that builds, and then it gets to a point where you think, I can't do this. I can't do it. I can't. I was stupid to think I could do it. I can't do it. And that's about the time that you start pushing. And then the juxtaposition of that pain with the relief that comes after you have the baby, all those endorphins rush in, and there's this bonding right then. And I mean, I knew when Daphne was born that she was my daughter, and that I would kill lions if they tried to mess with her. But it wasn't like, oh, it's my baby, I love that baby. It was just like, there's a baby. But because that numbness, I feel like it put a curtain between me and that whole experience, where it separated me in a way that I wanted to be separated. I didn't want to feel that pain. But we'll see this time, I guess, whether that pain ends up being a blessing, because I feel like I missed out, and maybe this time it won't. So that's it. I see that this is almost 18 minutes long, and it seems like it's out of sync. So if you're watching my lips because they're not doing what I'm saying, then I'm really sorry if that's distracting. But I just thought I'd tell you my story, and I hope everybody has a good week. Today is Sunday, February 23rd, and we're right at about 12 weeks. So we're almost out of the first trimester, so wish me luck.